Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to another weekly episode of the Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brad, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. And we record this again on a Monday where United are unbeaten again on the weekend, which is unusual. Even though it's not the
Another
weekend.
one. Hey, that's
Yes,
great.
it's great.
It's been
Um,
nice, isn't it?
yeah, it's lots of stuff to talk about. We talked last week. We'd do a podcast if we felt there was a need for one. Lots of obviously talking points. One of the things that's been quite nice, James, before I ask you how you're doing, is it's unusual for United, for there to be an international break and for there not to be some United scandal within the
Right.
first day or two,
There's
but to
still
fill up
time,
the
Phil.
news
Um,
hasn't really happened. I mean, beyond obviously the reaction to the ticket pricing.
yeah.
And I listened to a lot more comprehensive discussion on that to make sure my facts were correct. First of all, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Recovering from a little cold, so stuffy, but otherwise not bad at all. And you?
Not bad, yeah. But it was a strange weekend. I have to say, normally I do not like international football, which people say all the time, of course. And but this weekend, I did enjoy some of the games. The Holland Spain game, the France Croatia game. There's a couple of decent international
Yeah.
fixtures this weekend that I did enjoy. Watched the US, unfortunately, yesterday. Lots of things
I
to be
did not.
disappointed with. Yeah, performance was poor, but concerned about attendances and stuff. At
Yeah.
Pochettino's difficult start. But we're here to talk about Manchester United, of course. Lots of stuff to talk about. We'll talk about the Jadon Sancho discussion about whether Chelsea will activate that deal, whether they'll pay the 5 million, which seems to me incredibly low penalty for not taking him. Christian Eriksen will move on at the end of the season. Almost certainly, it will be a few others. Johnny Evans, most likely. Lindelof. We'll talk about Samuel Luckhurst's article that perhaps 10 players could be leaving Manchester United. Other stuff that's been talked about by other journalists we'll cover as well.
Yep.
I'll start with the Jadon Sancho thing, mate, because that has been garnering a lot of discussion online. It's David Ornstein reported that the penalty for not exercising the 25 million mandatory buyout clause is a 5 million fee, which to me seems remarkably low and almost an incentive to not pay it. Um,
Yeah, it is
but,
weird, isn't it?
but what is it? How bad does it look for Jadon Sancho that Chelsea would rather pay a penalty than sign him?
Yeah, it does, and it's a weird one, right? Because I mean, I imagine there are clauses to get out of obligations. You might have circumstances where a club can't complete the deal because of financial restrictions or things like that, and they have to pay some sort of penalty. But 5 million to a 25 million clause seems very, very low because it's not just that. You're not responsible then for the contract, the wages, all of that would come with purchasing a player. So it's really quite a get out of jail free card. If it doesn't work out, makes it a lot more of an option where it's to say you just pay a bigger loan fee. If you're essentially it comes across like a bigger loan fee. We loaned him for the season. We added another 5 million on. We did purchase him. So it's a weird one in that for Sancho. It obviously looks, if they don't execute it, and I think when he started there, it was looking a little better for him, but the last few months have been pretty poor. And when you're
Mhm.
on loan, you don't get a lot of time to prove yourself. Um, Now, still from some of the articles, some of the things shared on it, they seem to indicate Chelsea still kind of intend to get him.
Yeah,
Um, it's an interesting one because if they do buy him for 25 million and they go sell him for send him out somewhere else afterwards, they could even turn a profit on it in the short term for them in a very weird way if based on how it's structured. So I guess we'll see. But for Sancho, it's a really bad. I think it would be the end of his English career, right in
yeah,
England in the Premier League, because even though they're big clubs, United and Chelsea, and sometimes you can drop down to a lower team when you consider the wages, when you consider the profile, all of that, I think it would be the end. And he'd really have to say, all right, well, my ceiling might be some team in Italy, some team like Napoli, maybe. that would take a punt, as they have on some Premier League players, where it's a bit slower. There's a little more space in the game. But yeah, not a good sign that it's even being discussed for him at this point, is it?
But this is a thing that I don't understand. I mean, when Jim Ratcliffe was saying United are going to pay 50% of his wages, so you factor in the fact that United have been paying 50% of his wages, what United already owed Chelsea with Mason Mount. I mean, it's a net loss to have sent Jadon Sancho on loan to Chelsea if they don't exercise that option. Now, it's not as clear cut as, and you've quite rightly
Yeah,
said, that it's very possible Chelsea will. But the fact that United are providing an incentive to not do that um, is a bit odd to me. I
yeah,
don't understand contract law and why you would do that. And, there has to be reasons that I don't understand, but it seems to me that's a very, very low figure. And it's something that you only exercise if Jadon Sancho has a terrible season. And so then what do you do with this player then? I mean, the
yeah.
reality for Jadon Sancho, James, is he's never had one single good season in the Premier League.
Correct. Yep.
All his best footballs come away from the Premier League.
Yep.
And, there is definitely something to be said for players that are suited to a different style of football. I think Jadon Sancho technically is a very good footballer,
Yep.
but it's very difficult to defend Jadon Sancho at this point and say that you're a top Premier League footballer. Well, when has that ever happened? This decline has been quite, been quite precipitous, and it's sad because, you know, the whole freedom stuff. I mean, this just makes it impossible for him to
Yep.
ever,
Yep.
like if to me, if you're advising Jadon Sancho, you don't let him do stuff like that because you never want to diminish your options.
Yep.
Never. It weakens your hand in negotiations. Plus, other clubs see that. All right, what if similar happens here? There's risk now involved with this individual that, I just feel for me, it's been a PR disaster for Sancho for 2 years. Um, and
Well, just on that point, it is interesting because remember, a big part of obviously all of this was going into the season, going into summer. Ten Hag was still coach, and even though they kind of like made nice for appearances at the time, it became pretty obvious he was not going to use him in the Premier League, or was not willing to, which is fair enough. Manager has the right to say, I don't want to use this player, I don't want to play this player. But what the problem was, where you mentioned that about alienating fan bases and things, is that I think at the start of the season, Sancho would have been not like loved to come back in any respect, but I think he would have been accepted. He made it on the pitch, I believe, for some preseason games, if I
yeah,
wasn't mistaken.
he played against Arsenal. He missed the
Yeah,
penalty against Arsenal in LA. We were there.
right. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And so we saw him. He was accepted. He wasn't booed. He was like, it was okay. It was kind of calm, right? So what's the need to go stir things up with those types of comments? You have if he ends up back here without those types of things, he probably would have been accepted. There's zero chance Jadon Sancho would be accepted by the
Yeah.
fan base at this point.
Well, what Jadon Sancho should have done was, first of all, Ten Hag wasn't exceptionally popular. So he
Yeah.
should have made sure that the opposition remained between him and Ten Hag,
Yes.
not
Not
between
the
him
him
and
and the
Manchester United.
fans. Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
because then it's a fight between him and Ten Hag, and
Yep.
and you can win that fight given
Yeah,
the
he would have been seen
situation.
probably sympathetically once
Right.
Ten Hag was sacked without this kind of stuff.
But he chose to make it
Yeah.
against Manchester United, and
Yep.
that's a fight he can't win,
Yep.
because I mean, that's something that to me is just poor. He's been just really poorly
Yeah.
advised, and
Yeah.
this is a problem with PR. PR in itself is not a bad thing. My public
Yes.
relations is healthy.
Yeah.
How you communicate and relate to the public, it's not. It's not something sinister. You need to advise young athletes. There's an etiquette. This is the way you communicate. You have to understand that you're on a different platform now, that you can't, be tweeting stuff out like you're an anonymous 16-year-old, even though in your
Yep.
head you still feel like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
But the problem is that too many PR companies are only crisis management. So you only see them after they make a mistake. So they're not advising them on how to behave and do. So they're when you're getting public relations for defense, as we would say out here, you have a problem,
Yep.
because you're trying to fix a problem that didn't need to exist in the first place. To me, I just think, he's really damaged his career.
Yep.
He has to go to Germany, James, no matter what. And
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
he leaves Chelsea to go to Germany, I mean, if I'm him, I would be looking at the Bundesliga saying, this is my refuge. This is the place I
Yep.
have to go to become a top. And that's okay. And you can be in the England team in the Bundesliga. Harry
Yeah,
Kane
sure.
proved that. So to me, it'd be interesting to see what happens. United obviously want to sell the player. They need to sell the player for financial fair play, or for PSR, and to give
Yeah.
Ruben Amorim some options in the summer. Christian Eriksen scored. Good to see him score for Denmark. But by his own admission, which came as a surprise to nobody, that he will move on at the
Yeah.
end of the season. How would you rate his time at United?
Not well, simply because he's not really been available for most of it. He was doing quite well alongside Casemiro in that first season. He picked up that bad ankle injury from that tackle. I don't remember who it was, but it was in one of the cup games in the first season. And since that time, I don't think he was injured a long time last season as well. And obviously since he's come back, I think he was already older, obviously, and wearing down on fitness compared to what he used to be as a footballer. Um, but it's just one of those, like, it's not really his fault, but he hasn't been a player that's been at the level of athleticism, fitness, and all of that in there. He's had some really good moments for United, and there's qualities that he's shown that there still aren't many players who have in the squad. But considering the 3 years, I would say we got maybe 1 year out of it. So it's probably pretty low in that respect, though. Again, not because he's not a good footballer or anything, but just due to kind of the circumstances around it, I think.
I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, free transfer.
Yeah.
Secondly, United never really done him any favors. You can't
Yeah.
put someone like Eriksen into a midfield with Casemiro and then
Yeah.
expect to have an exceptional return. You expect the player to deliver, world class. I mean, you see him at Denmark, James. He's a fantastic player for Denmark when he's surrounded by the right players.
Yeah.
And obviously, considering it's been quite a tumultuous period from his first season onwards, it's hard to really lay any serious criticism at his
Yeah.
feet. I
Yeah.
think that it's the right thing for him to do to move on.
Yep.
Technically, he's a very good player. I think if he went to somewhere like Spain or somewhere like that, where it's a bit slower, where it's suited to players, you can play in a midfield in Spain and not need to have exceptional legs. I think that he would still be a very, very good player for someone for a couple of years. I mean,
Yep.
the story is a miracle in itself that he's on a football pitch at all.
Yep.
And as I've said before, it's a personal story, also something that, hits me personally, having had similar experiences with someone very close to me in my life who went through what Eriksen did. And to see his rehabilitation has just been fantastic. And to see him, back on a football pitch when we weren't even sure if he was going to make it off that football pitch
Yes.
alive. And so I think in that sense, he leaves with gratitude from me because
Yeah.
I don't, he wasn't in any trouble off the field. I mean, there was some games that he played that I thought he played very, very well.
Yes.
I think if he's in the right midfield with young legs, he's all right. But United have never had that, and I think it is definitely the right thing for him to do to move on. Good to see Rasmus Hojlund score. And
Yes.
with
Yes.
it was a good finish too.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when I saw the ball come across to him, he finished his first time. I'm thinking, does he get that pass if it's Dallo or Garnacho?
Right. Not often, does he? And look, I mean, that is we know that that's a part of it. Um, getting more of those chances, more for the confidence, more happening. I think, to be fair to both Dallo and Garnacho, I would say the last 3 games they're
Yeah,
making that pass, and that's why he's getting more chances. And not that he scored from that exact opportunity. I think he did one that was offside, maybe. I can't recall. Did he have one chalked off or something, or was it just Garnacho that did? I can't recall, but it's been better the last few games, and I think that you can see that it's resulting in more chances for the forwards, and including Rasmus Hojlund, to score. So there certainly is a big part of that comes from the team itself, as it is with every single striker. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo, his age is not making his own chances the way that he was when he was younger in any team, international otherwise, and you are reliant on other players making those passes for you, and you have something that obviously I think it's one of those things where you know, both parties and at United need to keep raising that, just
Mm.
just consistently making that pass, making the right run, and I think both will get more confidence from that. How high the ceiling is with those players to do it, we'll see, but I think we could certainly do a lot better, and we're seeing that in the last few games for Hojlund in United and at Denmark that he can score goals. Just have to do a bit more to help him with that as well.
Well, I mean, scoring against Portugal, it's decent opposition, to be
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, it
And
is.
that's the type of goal that will give you confidence on the back of scoring a goal, which is exactly what any striker needs, is to get consistency, to get back-to-back goals, not just one go in, because your confidence is still fragile. But if you get a second goal, now you start to believe that you're getting
Yep,
your consistency back. Now you're starting to trust yourself. Rasmus Hojlund will trust himself a lot more this week than what he did the week leading up to the Leicester game, and he'll start to feel like he's getting momentum, and that confidence will come back, because it's a really important time that he gets that confidence back, considering
yep,
United's upcoming fixtures, which really is a major chin check on United's recovery. And we've talked about this numerous times. We've been here so many times. How legitimate is this recovery? And we find out to our cost that it's still very fragile. We look at
yep,
United's fixtures coming up, and there's some very, very difficult fixtures. Now, this could work two ways. United could go out, play quite well in those fixtures,
yep,
get decent results, and you get so much more back from getting, good results against these teams than what you get, from a plucky last minute, draw against Leicester, win against Leicester. We've seen United go away to Arsenal, play well. We've seen them go
yep,
away to Liverpool, play well. They were never able to turn that into consistency, but they're going into these games now with a little bit of a tailwind, with a little bit of
yes.
momentum, where they weren't before, where you were approaching these games with trepidation. Instead, you're looking at this going, okay, well, with Dorgu back from suspension, that immediately makes United a better team. You have, hopefully, young Aiden Heaven won't be long before he's back. I know he's got his boot off, which is
It
encouraging.
was certainly a lot better news than originally we all feared watching that,
Yeah.
that it was something like what Shaw experienced or something of that nature because, just the fact that he's probably back within weeks rather than who knows
Well,
is a big deal, isn't it?
you have Shaw back on the grass, as they say.
Yeah.
Hopefully Manu isn't far
Yep,
away either. And I think when we look at that, that's a much more encouraging picture than anything we've had before.
yep.
So, we have a number of United players that didn't go away on international
Yes,
duty,
a
which
lot,
will
yeah.
benefit from the break.
Yep,
Mason Mount hopefully can stay fit towards the end of the season.
yep. I mean,
Which
even Maguire, Lenny Yoro, these guys have been out just a few games, and they didn't go anywhere, then they've been able to stay and get fully to really round the squad out.
I mean, even buying their teams, like, it's
Yeah, true,
remarkable that
yeah.
your backups to the people here get injured, then your backups to the players
Yep.
get injured. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sitting here reading about other teams, injury misfortune. Oh, this team has lost Rodri for a few. Like, in comparison to United,
yeah, I know.
it's ridiculous, because the amount of injuries United have had to contend with, it does just feel like it's cursed at times. I mean, the Aiden Heaven injury was just I was watching that going, I'm not a superstitious person, but there feels like there's some type of curse here. This is
Yeah,
absolutely unbelievable. I mean, this is
yeah,
one of the few bright sparks, and Bournemouth's kid's injured, a mad bum injured, who may be back before the end of the season,
yeah. There's a
which would be
chance, yep.
very, very important if United get to the Europa League final,
It
which
would.
is a possibility. Um, there's other outgoings this summer, James. Looks very much like Victor Lindelof will be on that
Yep.
list of someone that United, if you haven't got a contract by now, United, in your last season, in
Yeah.
March, coming up to April, you're not getting one.
Correct. Correct.
And um, I just, you look at United now, their threshold, their tolerance threshold is much shorter. And
Yep.
so, in the past, you'd have got contract renewals, you'd have got another season, you'd have got the, contract activated. You see what they did with Varane and stuff, where they just said, no, we're
Yeah.
not
Varane
doing
and
it.
Martial, that was it last year. They were
Yeah.
just,
And,
yeah.
and so it seems very much like Victor Lindelof will move on at the end
Yep.
of the season. Does that leave United needing another centre back?
I think so. And maybe not if Lissandro wasn't, unfortunately, as well. Speaking of injuries, wasn't one of the most important players missing for some time because essentially you have then left in the team with Evans and Lindelof gone. Uh, really, what you have is Aiden Heaven, who's injured but should be back. Delict, Maguire, and Lenny Oro as your natural center backs. That's only four fit players for three positions. Now,
Mhm.
Mazraoui has played very often as a back three center back, and I think he's been really, really good there. But you still only have 4 or 5 players. You at least got to
Mhm.
get another one in the door. Aiden Heaven's only played 1 or 2 games, so it's a lot to say. You're counting on that. Maguire, he's got a year left come summer with the extension, right? The +1 that he's got. Um, he's been having some of these niggling injuries too as he's getting older. He's got an issue with his hip that kind of tends to come up every now and then. So you really do need at least one more consistent player who's probably younger. Otherwise, you end up with that situation where you end up with a pretty aging group. And what we don't want to see is United next season, when they finally have healthy fullbacks, compromising on the healthy fullbacks to cover unhealthy center backs or a gap in the
Yeah.
center backs because
Also, this is taking into consideration Johnny Evans is expected to
yeah,
retire at the
yeah,
end of the season, of
yes, yeah,
course. So
yeah.
it does leave
At
you.
least one for me, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, I would
on the
agree.
left especially, I would say.
And especially when you consider United's injuries.
Yeah,
I mean, it's unrealistic to expect that you're not going to pick up injuries in that position next season. And you're
yeah,
quite right. With Lissandro Martinez, you just worry about the accumulative effect of all these
correct.
injuries and what type of player you get back. I remember, United had this with Gabriel Insane, and he got injured, done his cruciate at Villarreal away, if I remember. And even though Martinez has done this before and come back and proven that he can be a player, almost a sort of a different player, in that he
Yeah,
was a deep line player,
a
playmaker for
little
United
less.
in that defensive
Yeah,
midfield role.
yep,
Um, but the question is the cumulative effect is that going
correct.
to have on Lissandro Martinez? It's really tragic because when we talk about Bruno Fernandes being one of the signings since Ferguson retired, where you could really say they worked out. Lissandro Martinez was 100% in that
On
bracket,
that track,
on
yeah, for sure.
being an exceptional signing that everybody loved. And it's just such a huge loss for United.
True.
I mean, in many ways, James, you can track Ten Hag's decline to Martinez's injury against Sevilla.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
that's really, Marcus Rashford got injured around about the same time too. Um, and I just you can sort of track the decline of Ten Hag from that Sevilla game. Andre Onana. Interesting. So, Fabrizio Romano, I believe it was, reported that he had changed agents.
yeah, a little
An
bit ago.
agent
Yeah,
that has a very close propinquity to the Saudi league and
yep,
has a track record of getting players a move.
yep.
The Saudi league, I believe that if United could get good money for Onana, I don't think Amorim would be devastated if he left.
No, he definitely wouldn't, and I could say that I do know for quite a fact that United have been looking at keepers. Even at the end of last summer through this year. I don't think they're at a place right now where they want to go spend big money on a keeper. They don't want to go do a 60, 50, 60 million on a keeper type of deal like an Allison or something like that. Um, One of the interesting things about an Amorim team is the keepers maybe less not important because the keeper's always important, but you can see that it's you need a bit of just safe hands because you have a back three in front of you. You have a center back tends to be right in front of you. It's less of a need to be this like Ederson type passer or sweeper type of keeper. He's okay with a keeper who's keeps it simple. Just safe hands, make the saves, keep the ball down, make the simple passes, and be accurate. The problem with Onana has been he hasn't been any of those. The passing's been really wonky. The saves have been poor, like from the standpoint of just the basic job of a keeper. A lot of it's been kind of poor. So they definitely would be open to getting another keeper, and I think that they will be in the market for a young keeper who at worst could compete with Onana. But if they did get an offer that they'd be willing to let him go, they need a decent chunk of money though. I mean, 30 something million, I think, to not have a loss on Onana at this point.
I
So
think you get that for him. James going to Saudi
yeah,
Arabia, he's still a
yeah,
goalkeeper in his
probably.
prime.
Yeah,
Um, I think that I just think there's been too many individual mistakes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he makes he brings a nervousness to United's defending. But the second part of the question is in relation to who's your other goalkeeper, your obvious goalkeeper that you bring in
yep,
that is good with his feet. Is obviously a very good goalkeeper because these are the most important aspects of goalkeeping. Is can you actually, do the fundamentals, and
yep,
also you have to get someone who's a physical athlete that can compete in the English league, who's willing to come for crosses,
yep,
who is being able to deal with the physicality and the different nature of the Premier League. I don't know who the obvious alternatives are out there. So it's a strange era for football where take any position and you'll struggle to name the 10 best players in the world in any position that it's
yep,
obvious to me. Usually the first three or four are obvious, but I'm it's just that it's not obvious anymore.
yep.
Like we talk about ban a striker outside of Osman. I mean, I don't expect United would get someone like Isak, but outside of Osman, who? I mean, one position on the field, striker or playmaker, you should have 10 obvious alternatives if you had
Yes.
the resources. And they're just, even in South America, where's all these top strikers in South America? Like, it just is a really weird era for
It is a bit
football.
weird.
Yeah, where which then brings me to people like Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford, since leaving Manchester United on loan, I know he splits opinion, but he's someone that is playing in the Champions League and now back in the England team. To me, he's worth more than 40 million, James.
Yeah, I think that obviously, any team when looking at the value of him is going to look at his body of work and say, based on what he's done, and that you're seeing an improvement since joining Aston Villa, whatever the current level is, you're seeing an improvement. He's still young. He still has the physical tools. He still, has everything to be a good to great player for a few years and has the experience at the highest level and has shown up many times at the highest level. Um, when you look at the market out there, some of the things that does make the market really weird is every time you get a young player named who's going to be like a good option, the number gets thrown out. It's like 80 million every time.
Yeah,
And it's like, you get Ekitike as a striker prospect, 80 million. It's not 80 million. It cannot be. All these players cannot be 80 million. Um, but given those prices that are out there, I think Marcus is probably, obviously, and as it goes through the rest of the season, we'll see more as Aston Villa progress and in the league and all of that, what happens. But I think there are teams out there that would be willing to pay more than that, probably. When you look at the transfers that are there, and that I would say is value certainly because the type of player you could get from Marcus Rashford is worth 80 to 100 million. And so it's a there's current form and things and all that tie into it, but on balance, he's probably worth I think there's teams that would definitely at this point take a punt on more than that, just given he's back on an improvement arc. Even on joining a team mid-season is never that easy, and he's done so, and it's been getting better.
yeah. I don't think it's a stone cold certainty that he stays at Villa.
No.
In my opinion, we'll see what happens there. Anthony, another player who's had a resurgence at Betis. I don't think United will allow Betis to loan him again for the following season, because I think they'll have enough interest unless Betis are significantly improving terms, the loan fee. And I mean, I think if you look at someone like Quenda, for example, United were never in a position where they could pay 60 million for a player and loan them out and let them
Ugh,
stay somewhere. They need that money now, and they need that money. If they're going to pay that money for a player, they need to be able to put that player in their first team. How much does it benefit United right now to loan Antony for another season to Real Betis?
Yeah, not much. I mean, where it could work out, it depends on, again, this is where like the fees and all the annoying aspects of the finance come into it, because to sell him and not lose money, they're going to have to get 25 to 30 million. Now, for what he's producing in La Liga, he's probably worth that to some team in Spain, right? I mean, not he's not going to play for Barcelona or Madrid, but can one of these other teams make a purchase like that? Maybe. I think one possibility could be a loan with an obligation where there's a decent loan fee, full wages covered, and then a bit of a lower fee next summer where it covers the money that United owe, but they can get a deal done and it kind of washes for both clubs, and United can count it off of their books and all of that. So something like that could be possible, but I don't think they're under any circumstances they're going to be wanting to do just like a loan to anybody without something certain in terms of an end, a purchase or something like that into it. There should be enough interest in him to get something done at this stage, given his performances there.
Well, hopefully not with a £5 million buy escape clause from the
Yeah,
mandatory fee
yeah,
that you're
yeah.
budgeting for.
I'm,
You know,
it's a surprise to me that, but it certainly is just a weird thing, isn't it?
then of course there's the chatter about Casemiro. He has 1 year left on his deal after this
Yep.
year, right? So it's a year and a half.
Yep.
Okay. Not a stone cold guarantee that he leaves. And by the way, I
Correct.
have to
Yeah.
say that since he's been playing consistently and where Amorim has sort of adjusted his role in the team, he's looked
Yep.
very, very important. He's looked very, very good. Now, I know that was sandwiched in between two Sociedad games where I think that pace of the game suits him, but
Yeah.
um, it's United have been lucky he's been available, quite frankly, because outside of that, it would have been quite depressing. But not a stone cold guarantee that he leaves. But I must say, James, whatever the terms of the deal that he was signed on, I don't think it is. I think he's owed a bit more etiquette than constantly using him as a bad example. I just don't see any benefit to that. I think that he deserves a bit more respect than that, considering what he's achieved in the game. And he can't sign a contract that United don't offer him. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not his fault. It's
Yeah.
that the agent negotiates this. His agent's job is to get him the best deal possible. Manchester United are the only ones in control of what goes on that contract. So it's whatever your issue is. One, you keep that in private, and two, it has nothing to do with the player, but it feels like, I mean, if you're a fan hearing that, it encourages to me a negative sentiment towards the player.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's United have done a lot of stupid deals from a club perspective over the last 10 years. So many of them. Um, but he's out there and contributing now and adding to the team and yeah, in a different circumstances that Amram talked about, in how they're playing, what works for playing Casemiro and all of that. But there's games like that. It's an interesting thought because there's always going to be games like that suit a player. And if you just understand what he is at this stage in his career, which is still a very intelligent footballer who has achieved a lot and understood a lot, there's still potentially a use for him. And I'm not as saying he's he 100% has to leave. I mean, obviously, financially, United could probably improve the team more if he does, but at the same time there's probably going to be situations that are useful for Casemiro next season, to have him play and understanding what he can do. I mean, he could even make I think he could even make the transition to a center back, in this back three system
Mm.
because it's a little bit
Or back
different than it
three,
was
maybe.
before. Not in the back four because I didn't think he had the thing for it, but in a back three, the game in front of him, maybe in one of the wider positions where he can step up a lot more, I could see it potentially, just working a little bit for him,
I'm forever
in
haunted by
something
that
like
Arsenal
that.
game at home, James. Last
I know, but
season.
he was in the center back position. He was thrown in there. I'm just talking more of like,
Yeah,
I
but
take
that's
Bruno
just about sense
Fernandez.
and danger. That's about
Yeah, I
there's a
know, I know.
natural instinct that comes with being a defender that you can't coach. It's
Yeah,
a it's
it's true.
it's
It's true.
it's about having a different type of perception. It's about being able to perceive danger in a way that you can't coach. And I just don't think
Yeah.
a
Well, and
midfielder
there's a
has
whole
the
different
ability. Yes.
between those defensive lines, the offside
Mm.
trap, all those things are totally like you have to be second nature to hold those really well. But in some way, maybe United, if there's a way they're back into Europe, I think he suits the European game more than the Premier League game at this point.
But see, this is the
Um,
thing.
yeah,
If you look at him first season, he was absolutely crucial in United
yeah,
winning the League Cup, right?
yeah,
Last season, he was one of United's best players in the Champions League,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yep,
that was where he showed his best form. He
yep,
scored a decent number of goals. I thought he played quite well. And if United are going to win the Europa League this year, he will be a key
yeah.
component of that.
Well, he already helped them get through one round, which
Yes,
against the Spanish team, which is very good.
he will be. Yeah, so I think like if he was to leave at the end of the season, United win the Europa League, I don't think you could call his signing a failure.
No, I don't. I don't think you could. Look, the finance. It's always hard because it's always hard separating the finances from the reality of it. I think Casemiro's been a good player for us, and I think he's been an important player. It's just it's too much money, too much wages, but that's okay still from a perspective
Would
of
you have rated him ahead of Pogba in terms of his impact on
no.
United?
I wouldn't say no.
I
I
would.
wouldn't say because I think obviously United did win
They
the
won the Europa League under Pogba, the
yeah,
League Cup, and all that tour.
yeah,
Yes,
and I think Pogba was. Like, I think Pogba definitely was sacrificed by the club making even worse decisions, like, because Pogba was
yeah,
still
100%.
young,
Yes,
and so I think they could have done a hell of a lot more for Pogba, and he
I
was
agree with that.
oftentimes trying to do too much alone. I don't know that
Mm,
that's but but Casemiro
okay, I could
has
be convinced
helped
either way.
United. You know what I mean? So I get that too. But I think Pogba was really let down by the club. I don't think Casemiro's been let down by the club. It's just
I
messy
think he has, man.
overall. You think
I,
I think in terms of the team though, like, there's not that much more he could fit into a midfield, just because the age and
but what
things
I mean,
like
I think
that.
he's been let down by the club in terms of him
Yeah.
constantly being used. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
bear in
In
mind,
that aspect, I agree. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
Yep.
mean, bear in mind during the strategic review, it was repeatedly brought up
Yep.
that Jim Ratcliffe's isolated this as a really bad example of ineptitude. And whilst there may be some truth to the fact that the negotiating team bear responsibility for that,
Yep.
you have to understand about the impact on the human being when you're constantly doing that and deriding your players in public
Yep.
and using you. Something, James. When you're trying to cover United and you want inside information, you're desperate for it, right? And then when you get it, you realize how mundane and boring and how typical it all is and how
Yeah.
uninteresting it all is and how it's just basically normal life.
Yep.
Boring situations with human beings doing stupid selfish things sometimes. It's just not that interesting. And I
Yep.
look at that and I think it's easy to elevate these people onto a different level, but they feel the same thing you and I feel. They're
Yeah.
reading about their employer saying this,
Yep.
and they're going home to their family, and they're
Yep.
complaining, and it impacts how you perform. They're not robots; they're human beings with just.
Yeah.
And what goes on inside the football club is largely boring, non-salacious stories that
Yep.
that are really not that interesting. And I look at someone like Casemiro, they would deal with it in the same way you or I would deal with it if our employer was doing that. And I just
Yep.
think that that's not what you, I mean, who's the next Casemiro? Are you now going to turn around and say, like, we shouldn't have signed this guy. We're it's disaster. We sacked, Omar Barada because of it. Like,
Right.
I just don't think that is
Yeah.
the way you want to go about,
Yeah. Well, I
communicating.
agree. I agree. And moving forward, I hope that it's less like that as
Um,
well, for sure.
So even if you get all these outgoings and you clear all this room on the books, to bring in and recruit players. For me, United squad's already too small. So every player that goes out has to be replaced. How do you
Yeah.
replace all these players?
Well, this is where you come into a young team. I mean, when you look at all of them, Sancho, Rashford, Antony, Malacia, well, four of those are already gone, right? Right now, they're not with the team at the moment because Tyrell Malacia is surely expected to leave as well permanently. Eriksen, Lindelof, Evans, Heaton, and then maybe Casemiro. I mean, you have to sign. Obviously, they've made some moves already in Patrick Dorgu. They
Diego
have
Leon.
Diego Leon coming in summer, so that helps. Where you're really short is, I think, you're short in the midfield and you're short at the back. I think more than anything, right? Because if Eriksen is leaving already, you've used him plenty. If Casemiro leaves, you've used him plenty. You need midfielders to come into this, but without Europe, I mean, when you look at the numbers, and I did like a whole breakdown on this a bit ago, they can spend some money, they can get players, but they're certainly going to have to be younger players. They're going to have to be players on 75,000 to 110, 120,000, not
Which,
200.
by the way, is a really good wage if you're a young player, James.
Yeah, it's
That's
still a
not
great wage.
paltry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still great. I mean, when you look at the teams in Portugal, the young players there, they're earning 5, so 10,000 a week is still a massive increase on the wages. But I think they're going to have to be smart about it. They're going to have to buy, without Europe especially, they're going to have to buy young players. They're going to have to spend, they're going to have to do, Dorku deals. They're going to have to get 5 of those in the door. And they can, because there'll be finances coming in. There'll be money. Marcus Rashford, who, is likely that he's going to be sold, right? I mean, for the club perspective, that represents a big profit, because he's an academy player, and all of that as well. That's come through that they don't have a cost for. So, but they're going to have to buy players like Dorgu, and fit them into the team, get a couple young midfielders, at least another forward, another center back. Those are the types of deals they're looking at. If they manage to get Champions League and win Europa League, which doesn't seem that far-fetched anymore, we'll see, then there's a lot more potential with that, because the money difference between no Europe and Champions League, especially with the new format, extra games, it's huge, like an enormous amount. It's almost unbelievable. And then I think if that happens, United have a responsibility to try to stay there. They cannot say, we got in the Champions League, now we're I think that's the instance where you look at it and say, you have to go and get like an Osimhen. I'm not saying you go buy guys who are 30 years old, try to win the Champions League now, but you take a player like Osimhen, he's only 26. He'll still be there for 5 years. He's a striker. Strikers age pretty well. A lot of them are still scoring 33, 35. You go spend the money to get a really, really top player, at least at the striker position, to carry you, because you need those goals at the end of the day. You need somebody like that to try to keep yourself in Champions League. And from a whole perspective on everything that's been discussed, if you can get in Champions League now, they really do have a responsibility to try to stay there from that point, because it presents an opportunity to do so. So, big difference, I think, whether they can win Europa or not.
The question is, I mean, if you look at the top 4 now, James, that top 4 is not unpenetrable. I mean, if you look at the form of City, you look at the form of Chelsea, at the start of the year, it looked like the top 4 spots were wrapped up, but it's not that unpenetrable.
Yeah.
Do we need to have a top 4 team next season? I don't know. Because
I mean, Nottingham Forest are in 3rd, right? And they had a net spend of like 28 million, so it is possible.
It's very possible, and I honestly believe that City's glory days, where they completely dominate, are at an end, because I just don't think the individual quality exists anymore that can elevate you so far above your competition. And you can see the effect it's had on people like Foden. You can see the effect that it's had on other players in that City team, where it's really destroyed their confidence. And Guardiola was always the X factor in that, because you always felt that no matter how bad things got, Guardiola would never let it get to a certain level. He's just too good. But you've seen that he is powerless to stop this death spiral that City find themselves in, and haven't looked convincing in a long time to me. What's also interesting, James, when we talk about squad size, there was a stat that came out last week which was quite interesting. Carlo Ancelotti came out and said that Real Madrid will not show up for another game where they have 72 hours notice between the 72 hours. It comes out that United are no team in Europe has played more
United
games,
were first, right?
which was a really staggering statistic to me. And it also emphasizes the need, of course, for a strong squad. You compare United squad to Real Madrid's. I mean, and United are trying to compete with the same intensity, the same frequency of fixtures, and the same demands with, much smaller squads. So it's like, they really, the squad's too small. It is. They really need to heavily recruit this summer.
Yeah, they do. I think United have to sign. And I do think it's the intention, and that's why right now they probably will downplay big signings because I do think it's United. I go back and forth a little bit, but without Champions League, I think United need 5 signings. Not 2 where you spend a lot of money, but they need 5 Dorgu type signings, to round this team out and to have options so that you're not constantly compromising so much. I mean, we've talked about this so many times on here, right? How every single manager has to compromise heavily on how they want to play because they don't have a left back who's left-footed, or they don't have a right winger who's left-footed, or they don't have a midfielder who's actually a defender. Every single manager who's been at United since Sir Alex has had to compromise heavily. Not that he didn't too in the later years, right? They've all had to compromise so much. And so I think they really do need a bigger squad. They do need more players. They need to have every position filled to a point where no matter what, they're not constantly compromising when injuries and things like that happen. And they at least can put out the team that is sufficient for them. So I think they really do need to, invest heavily and get a lot of players coming in. Hopefully that's with Champions League, so it's not all young players because there's certainly a risk in that. But at the same time, it is interesting, talking about this thing because it's really a top 5 now with the strength of England and this new qualification. I mean, Brighton are 1 point off of Champions League right now, and so maybe you can claw your way back up. You're still going to have to invest, and you're still going to have to get top players besides that, but the window is open. I think right now is the best time possible because I really do think I agree with you on City not being what they were, that teams are kind of, Liverpool could be in for a massive wake-up call this summer with Van Dijk, Trent, and Salah all potentially leaving. The window is open right now for a big shakeup in the way that the Premier League is set up. And so I think there's a door here and an opportunity. But I mean, man, 4 points separate 10th and Champions League. So that tells you that you can do it. You can get there with the right steps being taken, even in one season.
One of those players that has been linked with United is Kenan Yildiz from Juventus. Of course, Fabrizio Romano reporting that a number of clubs are looking at him. No offers made as yet, which is relatively normal this time of year. I've seen clips of him. Looks a very talented young lad. I think he would struggled a bit at the start of the season, and then has improved significantly. I think I remember Paul Scholes putting an Instagram post up about him. Juventus, of course, going through their own difficult times, having just sacked Thiago Motta. I watched them a couple of weeks ago against Atalanta, and they were absolutely horrendous.
A strange one, isn't that?
Big, huge football, similar situation to United in many ways. But well, when you just mentioned there about young players getting a price tag of 80 million or whatever, here's another young player. I understand if you're Juventus, you slap as big a price increase, but biggest price tag on his head as you can. No one comes in and puts low balls their footballers. But when you're talking about struggling to get 40 million for a fully fledged international, that has already scored 30 goals in the Premier League and all that, but it doesn't make sense to me that you would end up paying 19 70 80 million for a young kid. which I don't think United would
I
do
don't think anyone's going
anyway.
to, is the
No,
thing as well, despite the prices that go flying around. No one's
yeah,
gonna pay
that
80
is,
million for these guys.
yeah, it is. But I think that United will, if you look at the aggregate sites, and I've been reading a number of them about the players United are being linked with, um, I think it'll largely be young players of prospects that they can
Yeah.
invest in and develop, because I just don't think United are in a position to buy at the top of the market.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe they could buy one player at the top of the market, but they have to spread those resources out across the football club. So I think you're going to see a lot of these things gather pace over the next few months, because I think United will have a very, very active summer.
Yeah.
And look, if this was under Richard Arnold or the Glazers, where you'd have said to me, United need 6, 7 signings in the summer, I said they don't even have the confidence to pull off 6 or 7
No.
signings, right? Because they can
Yeah.
never work on one at the same time. If you look at United signings last summer, the Xerxes and the Ligt one, I think it was announced within a day of each other.
Yeah.
So the Mazarui
I think
and
Euro and Xerxes were right by each
well,
other.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
correct, yes,
And
yes,
then De Ligt and Mazraoui at the same time as well, and
yes,
yep.
yes. So I think that they are very, very good about lining up deals that they can activate and trigger immediately, because those signings were made once United were able to sell
Yeah.
certain players. They were able to
Yeah.
activate them. They
After
put them,
July 1st too, which I think will
yeah.
be relevant this year also, yeah.
So I think they're very, very good about getting the mechanics of these deals done, so that
Yeah.
they're very easy to activate whenever you need to do that. So I think that they're already extremely active in that endeavor. Um, Lastly, we're talking about United's recovery and how authentic is it. There's some stats that just blow my mind when
Yeah.
you're looking at United, and there's been times this season where I felt as low as I've ever felt watching Manchester United, and as disconnected from what I'm watching on the field at any other time in my life. And then I'm reading statistics like they've lost fewer games since the start of the year than City or Liverpool,
Yeah.
which is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. It is crazy. It kind of blows your mind. And when you look at, I think since February, like early February, United have the sixth most points in England, above Arsenal, above Everton, above Aston Villa, above Manchester City, above Nottingham Forest, who are in third. And then they're also have won every single game in Europe. It's it's it kind of speaks to how wild this is. Liverpool are getting knocked out of every competition. Uh, that United are actually kind of doing okay, all things considered. There's nobody running away like City had for a while, where it's like they're winning every single game all over the place. Nobody's like that right now in England at all. And maybe it's there's always these weird outliers like that. We even had that last season where United were really bad too, and we had these weird outlier stats. But they've quietly been not that bad relative to just how crazy it has been in England this year, I think.
Are we witnessing the beginning of the Ruben Amorim, particularly nascent Ruben Amorim era starting to happen, or are we getting carried away?
Well, I think the last few weeks are for sure the best we've seen under him, right? And important games too. I mean, we be that as it may, a really good performance against Arsenal that they should have won. Win in a Europa League leg, two-legged game against a Spanish team is not something to be taken for granted. Um, we've seen improvement. I mean, we've seen improvement not just in the results, but if watching the games, I think all of us, yourself and myself, when we've been talking about them, we've been saying, that was actually kind of fun to watch. It was kind of enjoyable. It was kind of entertaining. What it should be. So all of that with maybe 5 players returning after the break. There's a lot of signs pointing in the right direction. I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing. I wouldn't say that, we should expect that the rest of the season is like a barnstormer, but I do think we're seeing finally a bit of that progress. And my hope is that with the international break, with the time a lot of players have spent and will have been at the club, finally a break, finally some extra training. where they can actually work on things and it's not just recovery and travel to the next game. Injured players rehabbing, returning, more time on the ground, more time with the coach. I do hope we'll see that continue. I think it's actually come at the right time. There's times when an international break can kill your momentum, and we may have felt that way, but I don't think so. I think in this case, it's more a case of it's going to allow us to hopefully build on it and get some rest because it's been over reliant and those little injuries that start to pile up. So I think it's
Mhm.
really come at the right time to see, you know, here a really hard run where by the next international break, I mean, I'm not saying they will, but the table, some consistency. If you're winning 1.5 points per game, if you're winning, drawing, lose, win, draw, lose in the Premier League this year, you probably get into the top six.
Mm.
It's crazy like that. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for the current form and direction in United are on. Relative to the rest of the league, it's not that bad.
It is not that bad. And if they continue with this form over, between now and the end of the season, they'd be in such a strong position
Yes.
going into next season. Where I think that everyone has a short memory in football. That type of momentum would convince
Yes.
people that United's recovery is legitimate, and I think it gets easier to attract players.
Oh
One
yeah.
of the things I
100%.
think we underestimate is just how powerful a pool Manchester United have around the world with
Yeah.
people still, that aren't intimately connected to every result that United have. If you ask most people outside of Italy, are Juventus a massive football club that are very attractive to go play for? The answer will be yes, because they're not intimately connected to every single result, where
Yeah.
we are, and they take a broader view of it. So before we go, I want to mention the fantastic and prolific United author, John Ludden. You can follow John on Twitter at Luds, J Luds. I believe I have that right. At John Luds. He has recently published a book called the Manchester United Collection, which is a wonderful compendium of stories, fiction and non-fiction that John has written over the years in multiple different books. A wonderful aggregate of all the best excerpts from those books. It's on Amazon. I've retweeted it on my timeline. John is someone that knows United forensically inside out and easily one of the best authors of any Manchester United content I've ever seen. And that's a genuine endorsement. So if you're looking for something to read, maybe on a holiday or just something to fill some personal time, I highly suggest you go and buy this book because it's something that I'm going to be doing myself. Anything else we got before we go, mate?
No, I think that about covers it. As certainly in for a lot of change this summer, but hopefully a good end of the season will lead us to feeling optimistic about all of that and looking forward and that we're
Yep.
really on the right track for real this time.
Well, we'll see what happens when we record next week.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully, all United players have a safe rest of the international window. Everyone comes back fit.
Please.
Please, because that's a rare treat.
Yep.
We'd appreciate that. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast as usual. Retweets, likes, and all that. Don't forget to follow my colleague here because he's putting out stuff on a prolific basis that's very diverse and well worth your time. So we'll be back next week, folks. Take it easy. All the best, James.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye.